Many times people will come to me and they'll say something like, John, I would like to spend a day with you. I understand that thought. I understand that comment. They're really saying, John, I'd like to see what your day is really like. And, every day has a lot of things that are different about it. But that question and that thought brought me to a lesson I kind of want to teach you today called 5 Things That I Do Every Day. And the 5 things that I do every day, I would say, are the secret of my success. I've often said that your daily agenda, what you and I do every day, determines the level of our success. You let me spend a day with you, and I just need to hang. I really don't need to interact with you. I just need to watch you. If you gave me one day, I could promise you by the end of that day, with pretty good accuracy, I could tell you how successful you're going to be. Because there are certain things that you just pick up from spending a day with. I mean, if I have a day with you, I'm going to pretty well figure out what kind of attitude you have. If I spend a day with you, I'm going to figure out how well you prioritize. If I spend a day with you, I'm going to figure out if you're disciplined or not. I mean, it doesn't take long to find the ingredients that make people successful. So when people say, well, John, if I spent a day with you, what would I see? Well, it depends. Some days I'm writing, some days I'm speaking, some days I'm in the studio like I am today. So my days are different. But there are 5 things every day that I do intentionally. Now, these 5 things, here's the good news. These 5 are so simple, every one of you can do these. This is not complicated, it's not hard, it's not difficult. They're all simple. But they are all powerfully successful if you do it. The key is action. You've got to do them. So let me give you the 5 things that I intentionally do every day. Number 1 is I learn every day. I have a capacity and curiosity to keep learning. I never have gotten to this place where, some people have this kind of, I've been there, done that kind of a mindset. Oh, I've been there, I've done that. Well, I've been a lot of places and I've done a lot of things. But been there, done that doesn't do anything to provide any kind of a growth for tomorrow. You see, the only guarantee that I have that tomorrow's going to get better today is that I'm growing today. And the only way that I can grow today is by learning. My mentor, John Wooden, had a great statement. He would look at me often and he'd say, John, it's what you learn after you know it all that counts. And what Coach Wooden realized is there's a whole bunch of people that they get stuck on know-it-all. They get stuck on the fact, I've been there and done that. And all of a sudden, they cease to be hungry to learn. They cease to have a desire to perhaps stretch in their capacity. And so just never lose that desire to read and to listen and to learn and to grow. A fun story. I was in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I was speaking for a large company, and the CEO, I was in his office, and he had to leave the office for about 5 minutes, and I said, I'll just sit here and wait on you. And I looked up at his bookshelf, and he had a lot of my books, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm thrilled. He has my books, he reads them, and so I thought I would surprise him, and so I would maybe sign a few of them. So I reached up and picked one of them up and opened it up to sign it, and as soon as I opened it up, I thought, wow. This book hasn't been opened before. He hasn't read this book. So I thought I'd have some fun, and I just put his name there, and I just wrote the words, please read me. And then I signed my name, I stuck it up, pulled out another book, opened it up. I thought, oh, this one hasn't been read either. So I put his name, and I put, please read me also. And I signed my name and stick it back up. And you can see where this one's going. I pulled down the 3rd book off the bookshelf, and it hadn't been opened. It hadn't been read. And so now I'm getting a little more desperate. So I put his name and I said, please read me also. And then I put, when you do, call. And I put my cell phone number in there and I signed it and put it back up, and he never called me. Okay. Now here's a person who was in a high position, but he stopped learning. There came a time where he somehow thought, wow, I know enough, I am enough. And I just want you to know that we don't know enough. So every day I learn. Every day, number 2, is I reflect. Reflection turns experience into insight. So when people say experience is the best teacher, that's just not true. Yeah, it's a common statement, but it's a stupid one, to be honest with you. If experience were the best teacher, everybody, as they had more experience, as they got older, they get better. And most people, they're getting older, they're not getting better. They've got more experience, but they've never evaluated the experience. You see, it's not experience that's the best teacher, it's evaluating the experience. It's out of the what did I learn from what I just did that really brings the fruit? So when my children were growing up, every week we would do different experiences. And they knew that I'd ask them 2 questions. If I asked my children this question once, I've asked them 10,000 times as they grew up. We'd finish the experience, and I'd look at them and say, hey, what did you love? What did you learn? What did you love? What did you learn? For a kid, they can tell you what they love a lot quicker than what they learned. And so I always ask it that way. And when my grandchildren came along, I've asked them now thousands of times, what did you love? What did you learn? What am I doing? I'm teaching them to evaluate their experience because awareness is huge. Listen, you have to know yourself to grow yourself. And one of the great mistakes we make in life is the fact that we're unaware. And so every day I reflect so I can increase my awareness. Every day, every day I reflect, every day I learn, every day I write. You say, well, of course you write every day, John. You're an author. You're a writer. No, I write every day because writing does 2, maybe 3 things for me that are essential for my development. One is I write. Whenever I get a good thought, I write it down. In fact, today I was doing an interview and a podcast, and the person I was interviewing, in fact, it was Don Yeager. He said something that was very important. So right in the middle of the interview, I'm getting my iPhone out and I'm writing down his thought. It's cool because I don't want to lose it. So I write to capture the thought. I also write to clarify the thought. Writing brings clarity to a thought much better than just listening. And there's something about when you see it, that it just becomes more clear. And I also write to create the thought because what I've found is once I start writing a thought down, many times it leads to another thought. A great idea is an accumulation of several good ideas. And so every day I write. I write so I can capture the thought, clarify it, maybe even create another thought. Every day, number 4, I share. It's very important for you to take what you're learning and pass it on to others. And it's very important for you to talk your thought out. There's something magic that happens with sharing your thought. 1 + 1 equals, if you have a good thought and you share a good thought with me, and I have a good thought and I share it with you, the natural thing is to say we have 2 good thoughts, but usually that stimulates another thought. 1 + 1 equals 3 in sharing. There's a compounding that once that we begin to verbalize. And so there's a beautiful thing about sharing that thought. And then every day I not only share the thought, I sustain the thought. Every day I work on continually thinking about what I learned. The true experiment, they put 10 people in a room and they give them a thought. They give them an idea and they said, we want you to take that idea and maximize its potential. An hour later, they go into the room with 10 and they've taken the idea and obviously they're sharing and it's gotten better. And then they remove 5. It doesn't matter which 5 they remove. Doesn't matter at all. It could be the smartest 5, the dumbest 5. I don't care. And they give the last 5 one more hour to think upon that idea 100% of the time. At the second hour, the idea has gotten better. Why? It's because it's been sustained. It was held on long enough to really develop. So every day I sustain my thinking. Every day I share my thinking. Pretty much every day I write my thinking. Every day I reflect my thinking. And yes, every day I learn so I have something to think upon.
We're always anxious to improve our circumstances. We're always anxious to fix the things around us. But so many times we're not anxious to improve ourselves and fix ourselves. And so the whole teaching of this is that when we start in life, you probably started off like I did, and that is with goal setting. And Well, let me just tell you a story. Kirk Campmeyer, when I was in my early 20s, asked me what my plan for growth was. And the bottom line is I didn't have a plan for growth. I didn't know that I was supposed to have a plan for growth. He was the first one that kind of made me aware that, John, growth's not automatic. If you're going to grow, you have to grow intentionally. And so I said, okay, I'm going to grow intentionally, but I didn't know how to grow. I mean, no one ever, it's one thing to ask yourself if you have a growth plan, but I didn't have a growth plan. And I went to my friends and asked them if they had a growth plan, and none of them did. And so I desperately began to say, well, how do I grow myself? How do I develop myself? And so I brought something very personal to me today because I'm holding in my hand where I started my growth plan. This is the dynamics of personal goal setting, and it's Personal Success Planner, and it was by Paul Meyer, Success Motivation Institute. And this is where I started. This is my first, in fact, paid $799 for this. Okay, and when I paid $799 for this, that year I made, I started off as a pastor. That year I made $4,800. So this was huge. This was a lot of money, and I had to save up for it. I didn't have that kind of money, and so really 6 months of trying and saving, we finally got to this. And so this is where I started, and it's just very important. It's very special to me, but I started my personal growth plan with a goal-setting teaching. And it's got cassette tapes in here, and it's got workbooks, and I worked it through, and I really went through this personal growth plan 3 times. The first time I got it, and I threw it back to get some more, and it took me, so I went through it 3 times. But the reason I brought this with me today is for a couple of reasons. One is this is when people say, what's the best investment you've ever made in your life? The best investment I ever made in my life is right here. The $799 I paid, which was an awful lot of money for me, the $799 I paid has been worth millions of dollars for me. The return is incalculable. And the reason I say that is because I'm going to challenge you in a personal growth way to invest in yourself. In fact, if you wouldn't invest in yourself, why should anyone else invest in you? I'm always amazed at people who want me to scholarship them. Want to, could you kind of give me a free lift? And my whole process, no. If you and I don't bet on ourselves, why should anyone else bet on us? The first bet that I ought to pay is on myself. And so this is my first kid, and so I brought it with you today to say that I literally started my whole growth life, goal setting. And isn't it interesting? I'm talking to you about how do you and I leader shift? How do we shift from being a goal setter to a person that just really works on growth? Because here's what I realized when I started in my growth plan. What I realized was this: the goals I achieved were not as great or as important as the growth that I was receiving in my life. That yes, I was setting goals and I was stretching towards those goals, and it was a good thing, but there was something happening internally to me that was more than places I wanted to go and numbers that I wanted to reach. And I experienced 2 what I call growth changes that I want to give to you. Because I think that when you get on a growth journey that's intentional, you'll discover these same changes also. And the first one is very simple, and that is that I went from growth in everything to growth in essential things. When I started off with my growth, I just said, well, I want to learn everything. And so I just read and studied and listened to tapes, and I just did everything I could to grow. And I was just grow. And one day it hit me that was never going to get me to where I wanted to be. That I had to go from trying to grow in every area and everything to grow, get essential. What are the main things that you just need to grow in? Now, for me, in my 20s, I came to the conclusion that if I could be successful in relationships, if I could become successful in training and equipping people, if I could have an incredible attitude that would help me be an overcomer, and if I could learn to lead and increase influence, if I could do those 4 things, relationships, equipping, attitude, leadership, if I could grow in those 4 areas, then I probably could be successful. And so I committed that these are the areas I'm going to grow in. And so I began to eliminate a lot of stuff so that I could grow in what I would call, for me, the main stuff. And I would say to each one of you in all of our sites and here locally that what you've got to do is when you start your growth plan, becoming intentional, you got to ask yourself, what are the areas I'm going to grow in? You can't grow in everything. You don't even want to grow in everything, but you got to grow in the essential things. For me, REAL, relationships, equipping, attitude, and leadership. And later on, I added communication because I knew that I would spend my life as a connector and a communicator. And because I am a person of faith. And pretty much for 40 plus years, these have been my 6 essentials. Learning how to connect with people, learning how to train, equip others, having an attitude to help me overcome, learn how to lead and expand influence, learn how to communicate well, and then become the person of faith that I really want to become. This is where I really spent my time. The second change I had in the area of growth was I went from growth with a timeline to growth without a finish line. Now, this was an amazing experience that I had because when I started my growth journey, I thought in terms of, well, okay, there'll be a finish line somewhere. There'll be a time when I've accomplished that. There'll be a time where I have achieved this. There'll be a time where I have arrived. And so I had a timeline out there. And I heard Earl Nightingale say that if you spent an hour a day every day on a certain given subject, now that's back to the essentials, REAL, that stuff. If you spend an hour a day every day on a certain given subject for 5 years, you could become an expert on that subject. Now, that really excited me because at this time I'm falling in love with leadership. I'm buying into the idea everything rises and falls on leadership. And so here we go. I'm excited, and I said, okay, I'm going to spend an hour a day every day for 5 years to become an expert on the subject of leadership. And that's what I did. Now, back then, there were not a lot of leadership books out. They were mainly management books. If you go back in the 70s and 80s, you go into bookstores, you didn't find leadership books. You found management books. And so I read some management books, and it kind of got me going in the right way. But I would talk to people that were leaders. I would try to do leadership experiences an hour a day. And every day, every week, as I would go through this process, I'd ask myself this question: how long will it take? Well, Earl Nightingale said it'd take 5 years. Well, I'm not only reading and studying and learning and experiencing. Guess what else I'm doing? I'm counting down. I think I'm Mr. Cape Canaveral. And I'm going, 5, wow, 4, 3, and I can smell it. It's out there. I'm getting close. There's going to be some light in this tunnel pretty soon. And I was about halfway in this 5-year run of countdown until something happened. It wasn't anything I read. It wasn't anything that somebody came and sat beside me and mentored me on or kind of gave me some thoughts or advice. About halfway in this journey, the inside of me switched. I was receiving so much value from my personal growth. I was learning so much about leadership. I was growing so much internally that I stopped counting. And I left the question, how long will it take? And I picked up the question, how far can I go?
I am immersed in the Last Dance documentary of Michael Jordan. I'm also taking notes because I want to learn something. I want to pull a lesson out of it. And so I had more lessons I'm going to give you, but I brought this down because of time and condensed it, and I'm going to give you, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6. And so let's get going. And as I give you the lessons, if you watch The Last Dance, you're going to say, oh, yeah, that was there. Number 1. And I think number 1 is truly number 1 because I think it's maybe the most important lesson, so I kind of want to start off on that because I think it's a lesson that many people miss, and here is the lesson. Michael's success was greater than his talent. I mean, it's fairly clear right now, at least, that he was the greatest of all time NBA basketball player. And so the tendency for us is to look at his talent and say, well, he just had talent like no other person ever played the NBA, and I would disagree with that. I think that there are few, not many, but I don't know, 20, maybe 30 players in the NBA over the history that were as talented as Michael Jordan was. And so although he was at the top in the talent pool, I think his success went beyond his talent. Several years ago, I wrote a book, and I really enjoyed writing the book because I thought it was helpful to a lot of people. And the book is Talent is Never Enough. And basically, I said, no matter how talented you are, you have to make right choices. In fact, they renamed the book and they called it Beyond Talent now. So if you want to get it, it's Beyond Talent with a subtitle, Be Someone Who Gets Extraordinary Results. And the thesis of the book was that it's great talent plus great choices that puts you at that peak of the success ladder. Now, I got the idea Talent is Never Enough, or the new title, Beyond Talent, for the book from Coach Tressel when he was at Ohio State. I grew up in Ohio. I've always been an Ohio State fan. And so he was getting my books and using them for teaching for his players. And they took my book, Today Matters. And then he sent me what he called the Winner's Manual, which was a manual for all of the Ohio State players that helped them get a winning attitude. And I looked through it and I loved it. But he had a section in the Winner's Manual that was entitled Things That Do Not Require Talent. And he talked about attitude. He talked about punctuality. He talked about responsibility. He talked about work ethic. And I loved that part of the Winner's Manual. That from that, I got the idea of writing a book, Talent is Never Enough, or now the title, Beyond Talent. And then when it came out, he used that for his players. We talked a lot. He's a terrific person, a great coach, great leader, a great president now. But we just talked about how the talent was never enough. And the thesis was talent plus right choices equals what I call a talent plus person. So when I was working on the Last Dance lesson, because I knew I had written about this, and I'm saying to you, the first lesson I learned in the documentary was that Michael Jordan's success was beyond what his talent was, that there were maybe 20, 25 other players in the NBA that in their time, in their day, were every bit as talented as Michael. But then I began to think of the choices that we make that make us a talent plus person. So I went into the book, and I'm very going to quickly because there were 13 chapters in this book. And I'm just going to give you the outline of the chapters. And then I want to draw a line, underline Michael here and tell you why he set himself apart from the other NBA players. So the chapters were like this. Belief lifts your talent. Passion energizes your talent. Initiative activates your talent. Focus directs your talent. Preparation positions your talent. Practice sharpens your talent. Perseverance sustains your talent. Courage tests your talent. Teachability expands your talent. Character protects your talent. Relationships influence your talent. Responsibility strengthens your talent. And teamwork multiplies your talent. Now, the lesson I learned in The Last Dance, number one, is that it was more than Michael Jordan's talent that put him to be the greatest of all time. So I went through these chapter titles, and I just put in a yellow marker the ones that I thought were Michael Jordan-esque. And so what did I put in that yellow marker? Passion, initiative, focus, preparation, practice, perseverance, courage, responsibility, teamwork. You see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of the 13 qualities that separate talent were very visible qualities and choices that the documentary on The Last Dance showed about Michael Jordan. It's what made him a talent plus person. You see, being the best was not good enough for Michael. I've been in this conversation with people before on the difference between best and better. And best is all about now. I give you 100%. Right now I'm giving you 100%, everything I can in this teaching. It's my best effort. But tomorrow, I have to improve it. Best can always be improved. Best is only best for the moment. And so my best today, my ceiling tomorrow becomes my floor, or my ceiling right now, my best right now to you becomes the floor that I build on tomorrow. So best always can be improved. And when you watch the documentary with Michael, the thing that just absolutely came home very clearly is that Michael didn't rest on the best. And one championship, he didn't rest on and say, okay, we got a championship. The reason that many times championships teams don't repeat is because they go on the chicken circuit and they go get their trophies and they talk about how good they were and they don't keep practicing. They don't keep working. And so they don't improve their best to better. In the documentary, remember when the Pistons knocked the Bulls out of the possibility of winning an NBA championship? What happened in that offseason? Michael put on 15 pounds of muscle. Why? Because he realized he didn't have the strength he needed to be the NBA player that he wanted to be. You see, the application of this is very simple. Leaders need to stay out front. Michael always visually stayed out in front of his teammates and the other NBA players. And by the way, the reason that leaders need to stay out in front is because they call it leading. Leading means you're out in front. And continual improvement, in Michael's case, in your case, in my case, continual improvement results into continual leading. You know, when does a leader quit leading? When that leader stops improving and getting better and people begin to pass him. Michael made sure that nobody was going to practice harder than he was, commit more than he did. He just made sure that he was always going to be the leader. He was the alpha male. Bill Bradley, who was a great basketball player himself, played for Princeton. I think he took him to the NCAA Final Four and then was a great pro player, and then became a senator. Bill Bradley, when he was a young player, his coach looked at him and said, Bill, you're incredibly gifted, talented. You're going to be a great player. But he said, I want you to know something, Bill. There are other people as talented as you. And right now, Bill, they're practicing. And if you're not practicing, when you meet, they'll win. And I've always thought about that illustration. I thought it's so true. No matter how good you are, it's those choices, that commitment to winning and practicing that takes your talent and makes you a talent plus person. That's lesson number 1 in The Last Dance. Lesson number 2. The margin between winning and losing is small. In fact, it's very small, but it's very significant. Again, I don't think there was a lot of difference between Michael's talent and the others, or even maybe his commitment to win than the others, but it was enough of a difference to let him win. Sometimes I do a teaching that basically says this, that if you knew how close you were to succeeding, you would be greatly encouraged. Because I think a lot of people think that successful people are just miles away above than what they are. And they have this huge gap, and they kind of are frustrated and say, wow, I'm never going to get there. And that isn't true. What I want you to do, and I think the documentary really was clear with it, is that the edge he had, he first of all, he was very passionate at winning. He was highly competitive. He was passionate at winning. But the edge that he had, although it was a small edge, he was consistent to keep that edge. He never lost it. One of the teachings I do is I teach that all numbers are not equal. And I'll give the illustration of an ice cube melting. If you want to have an ice cube melt, if it's 29 degrees, nothing happens. 30 degrees, nothing happens. 31 degrees, nothing happens. 32 degrees, nothing happens. 33 degrees, bingo, something happens. You had to get to 33 degrees. You see, all numbers are not created equal. I talk to people all the time and say, if you want to be successful, get in the top 10%. If you're in the top 10% of whatever you're doing, guess what? People will want your services. People will come to your restaurant. The top 10% will make you successful. But if you want to be super successful, get in that 1%. And again, there's only 9 points difference, but that 1% sets you apart. And Michael understood that. And it's kind of like the extra mile. If you go the extra mile, there's just less traffic. And he constantly was going the extra mile. He was practicing when the other players weren't practicing. He was working on his game when everybody else was kind of resting a little bit. And what I loved about him was that the statement is very true that the greatest hindrance to tomorrow's success is today's success. That's a true statement. But Michael never let that happen. He never let his success now allow him to settle. And he pushed people. I mean, you watch, he pushed people. Oh my, his teammates. I mean, many of his teammates didn't like him because he just pushed them because he knew that the only way he could ever get the most out of them was not let it become natural to them. He had to push them. And Michael learned what all leaders learn, and that is they want respect more than they want approval. And they want to lead more than they want to be liked. And Michael constantly pushed his people. I was in a conversation with Coach Matthew Mitchell, who coaches at the University of Kentucky, the ladies' college basketball team. And he's a wonderful friend, and he's a terrific coach. He's a great leader. And we were having a conversation one day, kind of a mentoring conversation. He said, "John, when do I push my players, and when am I patient with my players?" And I shared with Coach Mitchell that day that you push your players in areas of choice, in areas of values, in areas of their strengths. You push them because in choices and strengths and values, there's always room for improvement. I said you're patient with them if they lack maturity, perhaps, or if they're inexperienced and they haven't had maybe they lack skill. Then you're patient with them. But Michael in the last dance, he really showed that there may not be a lot of difference between number one and number two, but he consistently kept that difference he never lost that edge. He didn't, after 2-3 years, say, "Wow, I'm tired of keeping my standards where they are and my levels of excellence where it is." Number 3, wow. The third lesson in The Last Dance is mental toughness is the core of a champion. As physically gifted as Michael Jordan's body was and coordinated, the secret weapon of Michael Jordan was his mind, his mental toughness. Nobody and nothing would deter him from winning. And he was just mentally tougher than others. And when I have looked at the great athletes, what separates them a lot of times, that little gap I just talked about a moment ago, is that mental toughness. Several years ago, a long time ago, in fact, when I was working on this lesson, I had to call Linda Eggers, my assistant, and say, you got to dig out an old lesson that I taught probably 15, 20 years ago. And she found it. She got it out of the mothballs. But several years ago, I did a lesson that was very popular called Winning is an Inside Job. And the whole lesson was the fact that when you win on the basketball court, it just shows up all the work that you've done on the inside first. John Wooden, one time in our mentoring session, I asked him what he missed most about coaching, and his answers just shocked me. He said, "Well, it certainly wasn't the games." I said, "You're kidding. The games is where you won or lost. Very few losses for you." But he said, "No, I missed the practices." He said, "If we practiced well when we played the game, it was already a given that we would win." He said, I knew that the victory wasn't on game day. It was the preparation and the practice, the things that we did behind the scenes that showed up in the Saturday game. And I thought to myself, he understood that winning is an inside job. And in this little teaching I do, I talk about how do you have this inside winning quality in your life. And I said things like, be responsible for yourself. Make changes before you have to. Don't make excuses. Get control of your life. I love this phrase, work in the can't see hours. When nobody else is watching, you're working. This is what makes you a champion. Believe in yourself, your mission, and others. And what I've known is champions, they're bigger on the inside than they are on the outside. And when the Bulls were eliminated in the playoffs, again, you saw it in The Last Dance, when Michael came back from his misguided baseball career, and they came back and they didn't win the championship that year. The very next day, where was he? He was in the gym with his personal trainer, and he was already practicing so next year he could return as a champion. He never wallowed in his losses. He never felt sorry for himself. Such as something. He just had this inner mental toughness, which is the core of a champion. Number 4, the fourth lesson in The Last Dance is losing greatness is usually an inside job. Wow. I'm going to repeat that because you don't hear this lesson often. Losing greatness. When you go from a champion to no longer a champion, it's usually not because somebody on the outside took that championship away from you. It's because you took it away from yourself. Losing almost always for a champion is an inside job. People ask me all the time, they'll say, John, what is your greatest leadership challenge? And I just very quickly say, well, leading me is my greatest leadership challenge. It's easy to lead you, to tell you what to do, to point in the direction, say, get going. It's much more difficult to lead me. And this is what I'm talking about right now because, in fact, I say if I could kick the person most responsible for my problems, I wouldn't be able to sit down for a week. Okay, yeah, that's humorous, but there's also a truth in it. That my biggest challenge isn't leading others, it's leading me. And championship teams, their biggest challenge usually isn't the competition in the league. It's staying hungry and not allowing ego to get in the middle of the mix. And in fact, when you looked at The Last Dance, when Scottie Pippen, when he didn't enter the game because he wasn't going to be the player to make the game-winning shot, that was selfishness. That's losing on the inside. How about when he felt underappreciated, underpaid? Let me tell you something. After a while, that stuff gets to you. Michael, when he had burnout, he went to baseball. If he wouldn't have gone to baseball, if he wouldn't have been burned out, trust me, they could have had 7 championships. Maybe they could have had 8. Just think about it. They didn't lose because of the competition. They lost because he got burned out, tired, and he wanted to do baseball. I never understood him doing baseball because I always tell people to stay in their strengths, and Michael was the greatest basketball player ever. He certainly wasn't going to be the greatest baseball player ever. I never really understood it, but the documentary really helped me when his father passed away. And his father wanted to play baseball. All of a sudden, I began to see how the inner child of Michael's past moved him and nudged him over to play baseball. I kind of understood it. It was still, to be honest with you, a stupid move. But the point being, the point is a valid point, that I think that the burnout and the loss of his father and his father wanting to play baseball, I think it just kind of drove him over there. But let me just say that again, it wasn't the competition of the Chicago Bulls that caused them to lose the championship. It's Scottie, and, I'm underappreciated, underpaid. Wow, I didn't get to do the game-winning shot. It's Michael saying I'm burnt out and want to play baseball. It's Jerry Krause, the general manager. Hello, ego. Oh my gosh. Instead of applauding the team when they won their championship, what did he do? He said, well, it's the organization. It's really not the players. You talk about an egocentric individual who, I want to make sure I get credit here. I want to get credit. Well, he never made a basket for the Chicago Bulls. Now, was he a good general manager? I think he probably was. But I know this. You can be a good general manager, but if your ego gets out of place, you can become a bad general manager. And it was the inside stuff. The lesson's very simple. The inside stuff that basically they lost their greatness not because of competition on the outside, but because of what they allowed it to become on the inside. The fifth lesson is a great lesson, and I'm just going to do it briefly to it, and that is be the example so you can say, follow me. I'm telling you, Michael Jordan being the example for his players, he never asked them to do something he didn't do. His standard for himself was always higher than the standard for the players. So when he was griping at the players and pushing the players and yelling at the players, he wasn't asking them to do anything that he wasn't willing to do. Michael paid the price, and so therefore he could look at his players and say, I demand that out of you too because you see me doing it yourself. It reminds me of the time I was doing a leadership conference and 2,000 people were there and we were having a great day, and close to the end of the day, during the last break, a kid came up and said to me, he said, I love what's happening here. I think I want to do what you do. I smiled and I said, that's good. I said, let me ask you a question. We'd like to do what I did so you can do what I do. You see, Michael led by example. What Michael did allowed him to do what he did on the court with his own basketball, with his team. That's what gave him what I would call the moral authority, which is much higher than a scoring title or a most valuable player can ever give you. It's a step above. It's a step beyond. Okay, the last lesson is that one is too small of a number to achieve greatness. And in the early years, Michael Jordan was really focused heavily on his own play and his own scoring, and then he realized that if it was all about him, he wasn't going to win any championships. And so he said, I've got to make it about the team. We've got to get good players around us, and it's a team game. And the moment that they put their emphasis upon not the greatest player ever, Michael Jordan, but the emphasis upon teamwork and playing together and passing and playing aggressive defense and covering for each other. The moment they made it about teamwork, they began to, that's when the real magic happened. They began to win championships. And it's just always true. It's always about the team. Again, in my 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the law of the inner circle that I learned at the age of 40, when I looked at myself and I thought, I'm not as successful as I want to be. What's wrong? And I came to the conclusion that I hadn't spent enough time developing my team. And that's when the law of the inner circle was created. Those closest to you determine the level of your success. The moment that I concentrated on that was probably the greatest leadership decision, business decision ever made. It was all about them. Michael did that. Now, those are 6 lessons that you can learn from The Last Dance. They were simple lessons. In fact, when I gave them to you, you were saying, "Oh yeah, I remember that." They all resonated with you because we value you and we want to pour into your life and add value to you. Blessings and love. I'm going to talk to you in a moment about some other words, and I'm going to teach you what we call in the John Maxwell team company the circle of success. It's a cycle. It's a cycle of success. And it has 5 words in it. So these are words that we're adding to the words that you need to know today to maximize your potential right now so you can prepare yourself for the future. So let's go through these words. The first word in our circle of success in our John Maxwell team, which is our coaching company that we hope that you'll become a part of, the first word is test. And whenever we test all the time, by the way. And whenever we're testing, what we're really saying is, we know there's a better way. When we're testing, we're saying we know that there is always an answer. And maybe we don't have the answer yet, and maybe we have a way, but it's not the best way. Testing means there's just a better way. And by the way, I was talking to someone the other day, a leader, about the coronavirus and our crisis that we're in. And I said to him, this is the greatest day of testing I've ever seen in my life because people are so fearful, they're so panicked, they're so uncertain that you can test anything right now and you can get by with it. Because we're hearing all kind of predictions. Some of them are true, some of them are not true, some of them are really way out. I mean, you can say, start throwing mud on the wall. Nobody, during safe, secure times when you want to do something a little different, people say, wait, what are you doing? We've already figured out how to be successful, which you haven't, but you think you have. But during times when you're in the deepest valley and it's the darkest, people will let you test. In fact, they're willing to test. They're just throwing mud on the wall saying, what's going to stick? What will work? So there's never been a better testing time than right now. In fact, as I'm doing this teaching to you, literally last month, just through social media, we reached 1.6 million people in my teaching. Last year, in personal appearances, I only reached 1.2 million. In other words, in 1 month, by testing, by doing something totally different than what I've done before, I reached in 1 month more than I reached an entire year last year. That's the beauty about throwing it out there, testing it. I had a mentor for several years, a wonderful man. His name was Bill, and he would come to me and he would, many times in our conversations, look at me and say, John, when's the last time you did something for the first time? He was trying to keep me creative. He's trying to keep me testing and getting out of the box and staying curious. When's the last time you did something the first time? Now, when he was asking you that question, he was talking about what are you adding to your life that you don't have in your life that's going to make you better? That's what that question's all about. Well, I have a question for you today. When's the last time you did something for the last time? Yeah. When's the last time you did something for the last time? In other words, you said, that didn't work any better. That didn't work anymore. That doesn't satisfy me. Now, that's all about subtraction. Bill's question was addition. When's the last time you did something for the first time? In other words, what are you creating and building? But I'm asking, when's the last time you did something for the last time? What are you losing? What are you letting go? So what are you getting rid of so that you can be better tomorrow? What's held you back? When I turned 17 and knew that I was going to be a speaker all of my life, my father, who, by the way, is still alive today, he's 98. My dad, who is also a speaker and very, very successful, said to me, John, if you're going to be a good speaker, he said, you got to put well in the water so that whenever you go to the water, you have water. You go to the well, you have water to pull out. In other words, he said, you got to resource yourself well. And he told me, he said, file every day, read every day. And so at 17, I started reading and filing every day and literally have done it all my life. Just a few years ago, about 5 now, I was looking at those filing cabinets with thousands of articles that had been written and tens of thousands of quotes. I mean, if you do it every day and you do it for, 50 years, after a while, you just become pretty amazing. And I would go to those files when I was going to write or book or teach on a subject, and I'd pull out material and I'd get it and I would use it. And one day I began to realize I was relying way too much on those files, that I wasn't as creative and I wasn't testing what I should be testing, because I had a safety net. I go over there and, well, here I got this. And I was starting to read old thoughts, and old thoughts are old thoughts. They're not relevant. They're not new. They're not fresh. They don't breathe. There's no fire and passion in them. And I made a decision, a very difficult decision. All of my work for all those years of filing, I made a decision to get rid of all of it. And I didn't tell anybody. I didn't even tell my wife, Margaret, because I was afraid I would back out. And to be honest with you, this is a huge step for me. I can still remember we were living in a condo. I can still remember the day when Margaret was gone, and I looked over those files, and I called up one of the service people, one of the bellmen there at the place where we stayed, and I showed him those cabinets. I said, I gave him $200. I said, I'm going to do me a favor, get rid of those. I'm going to be gone for 2 hours. Just, I don't care what you do with them. You can, dump them, do whatever you want, but just, I don't want them here when I'm back. And so I took my time and left for a couple hours, came back, and he had done exactly what I asked. The cabinets were all gone. And then all of a sudden, I looked and I saw all of my work that I had expended, and I literally, where those cabinets were standing, I sat down right there and I wept like a baby for 15 minutes because I realized I had just let go of so much of what I had held on to. Now, I'm just going to say to you, one of the good things about a crisis is it begins to help us to let go of the things that we have depended on the past so that we can go to an entire new level of living. I'm more creative today than I would have been if I'd have had those files. I test more than I would have been because that was a crutch to me. I was holding on to what I knew instead of letting go so I could grab hold of what I could become. So that's a huge word right now. Just be testing. That it's going to make you the person you need to be during this time. Okay, we're back to the cycle, the circle of success. Test is the top, and then fail. Testing says that there's a better way, and failing says, I haven't found that way. You test and you go, oops, I thought that might work. It didn't work. But let me tell you something. Failing tells you that, I haven't found that way, but it also tells you, but I'm getting closer to finding that way because I've just tried something that I found didn't work. It's the Thomas Edison thing. It's old, it's worn, but it really is greatly true. And when he said about the incandescent light bulb, and he had over 9,000 tests and failures, and he said, I'm just 9,000 steps closer to discovering and getting what I want to have. What he knew is you if you test a lot, you're going to fail a lot. That's just the way of doing it. Wow. I wrote a book called Failing Forward several years ago. And I just love the title of the book because it was giving the picture of failure, yes, but when we failed forward. In other words, wow, we made an advance. Okay, we have to get back up, but if you're 5.5 feet every time you fall, you get back up. You could have gained 5.5 feet, and the failing forward is a beautiful picture of the fact that I'm testing, I'm failing, but I'm getting better even in the process of that. And one of the things I teach is the fact that you're never good the first time. I'm always amazed when people come to me and they say, well, I'm really working hard. I'm really practicing here. I've never done this before. I'm writing my first book. Oh my gosh, I really want it to be a great book. And I look at them and I want that for them too, but that's not reality. I guess in a fatherly way, I try to pull them aside and just help them understand that this is true of me, this is true of you. It's true of all of us. We're never good the first time, but we just aren't. We want to be good. We practice to be good, but we haven't done it enough to be good yet. If you're trying to develop a skill, the first time isn't a good time. It's a difficult time because you've never done that before, and it's okay. And that's part of this process of testing and failing that we're never good. I just finished last week what will become my 4th book. And it's entitled Change Your World. It's not going to be out for about a year. But I worked so hard on that book. And I rewrote it. Hang on. Me and my writing team rewrote the book 6 times. Yeah, we did. There was the first time, and it was okay. So we said, okay, now what? Let's start upgrading. So the second time, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth time. Now I'm not a novice writer. I've been an author for since 1979. I've got writing down pretty good. I really do. 6 times. 6 times. I don't want us to miss this. That the more we test, the more we fail. But what I really don't want us to miss is the fact that that's part of this process, and that testing and failing have got to be linked just like success has to be linked to them. And I'll come back to that in a moment, because right now, wow, I love sports and we're all going crazy with the quarantine and no sports basically. And I'll be honest with you, I don't love sports enough to watch the 1987 Collegiate National Championship basketball game. Honestly, once it's over, it's kind of over for me. So I'm not watching much sports. And so what are we all doing on ESPN? We're watching the Last Dance from Michael Jordan. Yeah, we are, because at least it's fresh material, and what an incredible athlete he was. But here's what I love about Michael Jordan. You saw the advertisement, I'm sure, sometime in your life. Probably the greatest basketball player ever. And what does he say? In one of his commercials, he said, I've missed over 9,000 shots. I've lost 300 games, and the 26 times I've missed the game-winning shot. In fact, Michael Jordan probably has missed more game-winning shots than any person that ever lived, and yet he's probably the greatest basketball player that ever lived. And what do I want to teach you out of this? It's very simple. You cannot, you will not, you should not, you never should separate failure from success. They're inseparable. There is no one that has ever been successful without having a lot of failure in that journey. It's just part of the path you take. And somehow we've tried to isolate it and put success over here and failure over here and say, these two things that they should never meet again. Wow. Don't separate them. They belong together. In fact, it's out of our failures that we have a humility that allows us to have a great center that allows us to take that success and be more balanced in it. And it's just you've got to go through failure to get to success. You just have to. There's no other. You don't bypass failure and say, I don't want failure and disappointment. I just like to get to no. You got to go through it. You got to go through failure to get to success. So we're learning some words that are maximizing us right now. Test, fail. Here's the next word, learn. And by the way, the value of failure is that you're learning something from it. So when anybody talks about failure in their life, the question I always ask them in that failure is, talk to me. What have you learned? Because that's absolutely huge. What have you and I learned? And what are you and I learning through the coronavirus right now, through this crisis? What are we learning? You know, in the Peanuts cartoon, Charlie Brown, he's at the beach and he's spent the whole day and he's carefully built a pretty amazing castle in the sand, and he's standing back and he's looking at it and he's just admiring it. And all of a sudden, the big waves come in and a storm comes in and just goes over the castle and engulfs the whole castle. And all at once, all of his artwork, all of his time, all of his effort, it's all just with one wave washed away. And he's standing now before where this castle was, this just smooth place of sand, and where his artwork stood, it's all gone. Everything's gone. And he's saying to himself, yeah, there must be a lesson here, but I don't know what it is. Well, that's Charlie Brown. He always knew there was a lesson. He just wasn't sure what it was. Well, in this time of crisis, there is a lesson. But you want to advance a little bit beyond Charlie. You want to stay with it long enough to ask yourself, what am I learning from it? Wow. I'm learning a lot from it. I'm learning a lot about myself. I'm learning that I need more time for creativity than I've given it. I'm at a max creative time in my life right now, but I know why. It's because I have time to be creative. I need to have some margins in my life for my health. This has been good for me. I'm learning. I'm having to make changes. I know you are too. I know you are. Let me give you another word that will help maximize us during this crisis, and that is the word improve. Yeah. And by the way, just like the value of failure is that we learn from it, the value of learning is that we improve out of it. If learning by itself there's not much value in learning. I mean, if you want to know something, just get on your iPhone and ask Siri. She'll tell you. Learning is you learn something so that you can improve. Wow. Here's what I believe. Everyone can improve. You can improve. I can improve. Everything can be improved. I believe that. Everything. No matter what you're doing, everything can be improved. And I believe that every day has improvement possibilities. Every day. Today is another day where you and I can improve. One of my favorite stories on improvement comes from my friends at Chick-fil-A. Great people. I've had some wonderful training, teaching moments with them. And there was a time, this goes back, maybe 18, 20 years ago, when the Boston market was starting to maybe cut in a little bit to Chick-fil-A's profits and market share. And so the board was talking about the fact that we need to get bigger. And Truett Cathy, the founder, who's now passed away, what an incredible man he was. Truett Cathy looked at the board as they're saying, got to get bigger. And he looked at him and said, don't worry about getting bigger. Just worry about getting better. And trust me, he said, if we get better, the customers will make sure we get bigger. They'll demand that we get bigger. And I thought to myself, he understood the value of improvement. A book that I read really in my high school years that marked me greatly was a book by James Allen. And James Allen, As a Man Thinketh, was the title of the book. He wrote this statement that just has been sealed in my heart for so many years. He said, people are anxious to improve their circumstances, but they're not anxious to improve themselves. Now get the picture. They're anxious to improve their circumstances. Let's get rid of the crisis. Let's get over the crisis. When's the crisis going to be? That's all circumstances, folks. They're anxious to get the crisis gone, fix the crisis, remove the crisis, whatever. Get the crisis out of my life. They're anxious to improve their circumstances. What they're not anxious to do is improve themselves. And so what does he say? He said, because they don't improve themselves, they remain bound. I don't want us to remain bound out of this crisis. I want us to be freed out of that crisis entirely differently than that. So during this crisis, I gave you a challenge, and that is focus on improving yourself more than improving your circumstances. Again, that's why I'm giving you these one words that will maximize you today to prepare you for tomorrow. So am I improving? Am I improving? Am I improving in my humility, adaptability, open-handedness, my discussions with my peers? Am I improving in my questions, my reflections, my curiosity, my testing, my failing, my learning? Am I improving in these areas? I'll just give me a couple more minutes because there's another word I want to introduce to you right now, and that is the word re-enter. It's a great word. Now notice the cycle of success. Test, fail, learn, improve, re-enter. Now when do you re-enter? When do you get back in the game? After you've tested, failed, learned, and improved. You know, in America, we just love a tenacious person, and we love a person that's just always in the fight, and they just stay in the game. And, you know, it's kind of like they rise up and they hit an obstacle, and they go back down, and they just keep getting back up, and we just look at them and say, oh, what a tenacious person. Boy, they're never down. They're either up or they're getting up. And let me tell you, this is not a picture of a tenacious person. This is a picture of a stupid person. Let me make a suggestion. While you're down, stay down until you have figured out why you keep getting knocked down. You see, the only time to re-enter the game is when you've learned from your failures and improved on what you've learned. Once I get better, I can get back into the game. And, you know, I just real quickly suggest again that if you want to kind of get into a new game, maybe a new career, if you'll again go to coachwithjohn.com, go to that website, we'll have a little webinar that'll teach you how to kind of get started on the journey and perhaps even, get the skills to be a John Maxwell coach. I would love to have you. Okay. One more word, and I close, and that's prayer. And you may not be a person of faith, and you know me now. You know me. I tell you this all the time. Doesn't ever matter to me. I love you unconditionally, regardless of background, religion. Doesn't matter. Those things are not important to me. The only thing that's important to me is you. I value you. But the serenity prayer is such a terrific prayer for crisis, and as you know, it's used in so many incredible forums where people are trying to improve their life, Alcoholics Anonymous, et cetera. I mean, it's a great prayer, and I just close with it, and I'll read it to you, and you can just kind of listen along, and it's just very simply, it says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. That's what I pray for you right now. It's what I pray for myself. Help us to understand the things we cannot change and have the courage to do the things that we can to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
When I was 27, I did this. So I developed a strategy I'm going to give you right now called Plan Ahead. And this is how to navigate successful change. And can I tell you something? I wrote this down at 27. I followed it. I followed today. It really works. The letter P, predetermine the change that's needed. The first thing you want to do is you want to sit down and you want to predetermine what is the change that's needed in my life. Because if you're going to turn something around, change has to happen. Now, you don't want action without understanding what you're wanting. So your whole goal isn't to go in and change something. Your goal is to change something that matters, that works. So only you as a leader can predetermine what that change needs to look like. And the way you do it is basically say, this is what is. I mean, hey, Lou Holt said, I have a losing team. I want to have a winning team. What's it mean to take a losing team and make them a winning team? I asked him that process. And Lou told me, he said, John, I asked the players that were on the team that were coming back, why do you think you lost so many games last year? He said, what I did is I did two things. I listened to everybody that was in that losing environment. I asked a lot of questions until I figured out what the issues were. And then he said that great statement, how does a leader that doesn't ask questions ever figure out what to do? I love that. If you're not asking questions of your people, you don't have a clue where they are. You don't have a clue what they think. And he said, I just asked questions. Arthur Blank, when he bought the Atlanta Falcons, told me the very same thing. He said, John, I just went out on the street and I just asked the fans, tell me, why don't you go to the Falcons games? And they said, because they stink. They're not any good. Prices are too high. Food costs too much. He said, I just got all those lists. And he said, here's what these leaders know. The answers to the questions you ask will be the strategy that you implement to make the change. The strategy is within the people, but nobody's extracted it out of them. So you got to predetermine the change that is needed. And I think you do that by finding out where the people are, asking the question. After a while, you got it. The picture begins to be clear. The letter A, lay out your steps. Now, I've got to lay out my steps to bring people through successful change. If I walk close to the people through this change, I'll be their leader. If I walk far ahead of the people in this change, I'll become a martyr. You don't want to be a martyr. The good news is if you die a martyr's death, you're always special in the hearts of people. Bad news is you're dead. That's just not a good thing. You with me? So you got to do what I call the leadership dance. This is the leadership dance. You can call me the Arthur Murray of leadership. Okay? Here's the leadership dance. This is the way this works. You got to walk ahead of them so they can see where they got to go. But you got to be close to them. Don't be walking far ahead of them. You with me?
Yes.
Close enough so they can see. You got to walk beside them so they can participate with you in the journey, so that you can listen and you can interact and you can take this journey together. They're in the seat beside you. And you got to walk behind them so that you watch the people that you empower. And the leadership dance is doing all three of those things at the same time. You walk ahead as an example, you walk beside as a friend, you walk behind as a leader that empowers. And once you can do those three things and mix it up with the people, you're laying out your steps very well. The letter A is adjust your priorities. Very simple. Whenever you're going through change, there's no such thing as a pre-game plan that you actualize out completely. Let me tell you the difference between a manager and a leader. A manager is a person who took plan A and won't get off of it because he doesn't want it to change on him. He's got the plan out. He's got the strategy out. Don't mess with it. This is the strategy. Here, stay right here. Let me tell you, a leader. A leader starts plan A because he knows you have to have a plan. But he, at any moment, is ready to change to plan B because he's found out a better way. If you think you get the answers on the front end, you've not led very much. Your answers come in the leadership itself, not in the front end. That's why plan A never ends up plan A. It's plan B or plan C. Why? Because you adjust and you hear and you listen and you, hey, by the way, you seize that opportunity. Remember, the great coaches are great because they make halftime adjustments. That pre-game plan at halftime has to be revisited. And you have to say, okay, what works? What doesn't work? And the changes you make have to be critical changes, not cosmetic changes. Remember this, cosmetic changes are easy to accept and implement. So people like cosmetic changes. They change the color, they change the number a little bit, and they just love that kind of stuff. It always kind of bugs me a little bit because I sit there and say, and, where are you going with it? Where are you going? Outside they like gray better than black, okay. What else are we going to do, okay? And so you want to make critical changes. You don't want to make cosmetic changes. And understand this. As you make these changes, there's always an answer. Don't ever get into that scarcity mindset as a leader that if I go this path, there's no answer down to this path. There's always an answer. And there's usually more than one answer. That's why leadership is such a great art. Leadership is such a great art because you begin to understand that as you lead them, as you journey, you give them the best leadership. And that's why trust is essential in the people with you. That's why trust is essential, so that you can make these changes as you go to get them there. Okay. And the next one is notify your key personnel. Sit down when you're going through changes, and there are two kinds of key people you need to notify. You need to notify your influencers. These are the people that they better say yes because you're not going to get it done without their yes. Their approval is essential. Are you with me? So you got to notify up front the influencers, and you got to notify up front the implementers. They're the ones that are going to make the dream come true. So you got to get the permission of the influencers for the plan to fly, but then you got to get your implementers because they're going to work the plan. So you notify key personnel. Then you allow time for acceptance. Now you sit down with your key people and you allow them to have time to accept where you're going. Now this is where leadership art is at its highest form, because your only intuition and timing are a result of a leadership gift, or they're a result of giftedness. Whatever you're gifted in, you understand timing and intuition. If you're not gifted in it, you don't have timing or intuition going for you at all. So you're intuitive in your giftedness. Your ability to do timing is in your giftedness. So this allowing time for acceptance, this is where you begin to allow people to have the time that they need to move forward with you. And to do that, you have to, first of all, slow down. And when I say slow down, this is something I've always had a problem with. I'm dealing with one of my weaknesses now. I don't slow down well. When I see it, I'm gone. And then I realize, I got to take people with me. So I come back to get you. But when I come back to get you, it's like, are you ready? And if I come back to get you and you're not ready, I got you. And I'll sometimes go again. And I have to really work hard on this slowing down process, okay? Because naturally I want to speed up. I don't like anything slow. There's not. I just I like to drive fast. Yeah, it's just. I have a need for speed, okay? I have a need for speed, okay? And as a leader, what happens is you get too far out in front of your people. Right. Does that make? And so you got to slow down. Second thing to do in this allowing time is you got to make sure you're clear in your communication. Because when they don't understand, people cannot follow what they do not understand. And so all communicators understand the value of clarity on the front end. So I travel a lot, and I brought this with me because I just love it. When you travel, you just find some funny things that are written. And these are signs in English from various parts of the world. For example, the dry cleaners in Bangkok. I love this. Drop your trousers here for the very best results. So a bunch of people in front of that dry cleaners mooning the rest of the people. Hotel brochure in Italy. This hotel is renowned for its peace and solitude. In fact, Crowds from all over the world flock here to enjoy its solitude. This is from a Tokyo hotel. It is forbidden to steal hotel towels. Please, if you're not a person to do such a thing, then please do not read this. In Bucharest hotel lobby, the lift is being fixed for the next day. During that time, we regret that you will be unbearable. Hotel in Athens. Visitors are expected to complain at the office between the hours of 9 and 11 o'clock daily. Is it complaining time yet? Is it? In a Rome laundry, ladies, leave your clothes here and spend the afternoon having a good time. Outside a Hong Kong tailor shop, ladies may have a fit upstairs. In a Rhodes tailor shop, order your summer suits. Because it's a big rush, we will execute customers in strict rotation. Bang! Next. In Copenhagen, an airline ticket office, we take your bags and send them in all directions. You know, it's our gift. We'll just send them anywhere they are possibly. Make your communication clear. Head into action. The H is head into action. Get going. Just start going. You never know the level of commitment from your people until you ask for action. You just never know how committed they are. The letter E, expect problems. Expect them. Why? Because motion causes friction. You start moving. And it's a tremendous leadership mistake to think that you have such a plan that is problem-free. Okay? And that everybody will buy in. So what leaders need to do, this is so beautiful. It's so negative, but it's so good. When I say expect problems this whole process, here's what you got to do as a leader. You got to think the worst first. You got to think the worst before anyone else. You got to speak the worst first. And you got to answer the worst first. You got to do all three of those things. In other words, you got to think what problems are going to be there. And then when you figure out what problems are going to be there, you say, now as we do this, there are a whole bunch of problems we're going to encounter. When you speak it up to the people, they'll say, oh my gosh, he's already figured out that we got, and let me tell you, when those problems occur, let me tell you what we're going to do. When you can do that well, understand you're really helping them with positive change. And the next one is always point to your successes. Somebody said, why? I said, because you always have people point to your failures. I mean, some people, that's their spiritual gift. You understand. If they can't find criticism, they're just not very comfortable. And then daily review your progress. Daily review your progress. Why? Because things get off on a daily basis. Things get off course on a daily basis. Problems occur on a daily basis. And I close this section of creating positive change, which is the acid test of leader. I close this because in the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, I have what I call the law of buy-in. And the law of buy-in, I think, answers this whole process of creating positive change within an organization. The law of buy-in just simply says people buy into the leader before they buy into the vision. And so what I want you to understand is when people say, can I create positive change within the organization? Can I do a U-turn? Can I turn this around? The question is very simple. How much of the people bought into you? If they bought into you, you can turn it around. Just think as I close of the story I gave you of Lou Holtz that turned 6 university programs around, losing programs within 2 years, had them in college bowls. Think of what happened about the 5th college he went to with a reputation of a turnaround U-turn leader. Can you imagine just the excitement and the momentum of Lou Holtz coming to our college? You know, we just stink. And he's going to come here and he's going to turn us into winners. Okay. Now let me tell you something. It's a phenomenal thing when you have your reputation that you're a problem solver, and it's a phenomenal thing when you have a reputation that you turn things going the wrong way around and you make them positive. Once you get that, this is a leadership edge that you have. It's a leadership edge. It gives you a sense of momentum. It gives you a sense of moral authority that allows you to come back into a situation now, here's what I learned a long time ago. When people believe the best in you as a leader, they give their best to you as a leader. So you want to become good at this session, because this is the area that once you can do it and you can do it well, you kind of get a reputation as a turnaround artist, a U-turn leader that creates positive change, and then all kind of very good and exciting things happen. So I wish that for you. I wish that for me. I wish that for all of us.